I've had 3 different species of cardinal fish here in quarantine for 5 or 6 months now. I've been waiting to put them into my own reef tank in the house when I felt that the tank was capable of handling that kind of fish load. I now do believe it's capable of handling that fish load. We haven't resolved the algae problem completely, but we're definitely working in that direction. The algae scrubber is really putting out, or should I say growing, algae itself. In fact, once again, just last Saturday night before I went to bed, I discovered that it was overflowing slightly, and I had to get up and pull that screen out in a late Saturday night cleanup effort. But I got that all taken care of, and as long as I stay on top of the frequency of cleaning the screen, I shouldn't have any further problems there. I mean, 3 times the charm, right? So I mentioned there are 3 different species of cardinal fish. There's the Banggai cardinal. There's 1 each in each bucket. I haven't been the most successful in keeping those. Buying from the wholesalers, I'll usually lose 1 or 2 right away, and then over time they seem to whittle off by themselves. So I've actually kept a pair of them separate from each other in separate tanks. I've also got some of those long spine cardinal fish. They're the ones that have that blue hue to their face. I thought I had another dozen of those, and I was going to combine them with the already dozen in the tank, but doesn't look like I have a dozen of them, but that'll increase the school effect in there. And then Banggai cardinals, inexpensive, not the boldest in color, but kind of some of the weirdest in color, kind of a clown red polka dot yellow stripe pattern. So it goes towards the school effect that I'm kind of like looking for in the tank. So I'm going to go ahead and start acclimating, and I think while I'm acclimating, what I'll also do is siphon out some of the algae that's growing back in the tank again. The algae scrubber is definitely doing its job, but there must be a tremendous amount of nutrients in the system, because not only does the algae in the scrubber really grow fast, and if I don't address it frequently, like weekly, I end up with little spillages down there, and so I really need to stay on top of that. And that's not to say anything negative towards the scrubber. It's doing what it's designed to do. It just happens to be that this tank has a pretty high level of nitrate and phosphate, and the scrubber's, again, doing what it's designed to do, and that is to grow algae on a medium in there that is supercharged in a sense. So again, what I'm going to do today is acclimate fish and siphon out some more algae at the moment. We're now siphoning some water from the tank down into the 5-gallon buckets that we have the fish in. This will allow the fish to start getting used to not just the temperature, but any variations in pH, maybe salinity, any other minor differences in water quality. Will allow these fish to remain in the buckets, mixing with some of that old water, or should I say the new water from the tank, for at least 30, possibly 60 minutes, depending upon the variation.
And if you're bringing fish home in bags from the local shop, you'll want to float those bags in the tank, allowing the water to slowly fill the bags, which in turn allows the fish to acclimate or adjust.
And then we'll go ahead and move these buckets out of the way so we can go ahead and add another 5 gallons of new salt water to the tank, and then begin to start siphoning out some of the algae that are still in the tank. And I just thought I'd take a moment and point out the source of the new salt water I'm putting into the tank. Real ocean water. I have about 450 to 600 gallons delivered every other week. Sure beats having to purify fresh water, inventorying bags of salt, and better yet, I don't have to devote any time to making it. It's delivered for me.
but I still can't seem to get away from lifting those heavy 5-gallon buckets and 5-gallon jugs. Heck, after 20 plus years, I think I'm an inch shorter, and I think my arms are about 2 inches longer.
Now we'll go through and start siphoning out some of that hair algae that's still growing inside there. I would say what algae we do have left, which is substantial, but it's patchy. It's not all over the place, although it's still growing all over the place. But it's definitely cut back, and again, I can see by the amount of algae that's produced by the scrubber that it's an extremely fertile environment inside there. Fertile meaning high in nutrients, more specifically nitrates and phosphates. So let's go ahead and try to siphon out what we can to aid it along.
While still being positive with regards to the algae scrubber, it in no way has decreased the amount of maintenance on the tank. I'm still having to do regular water changes, which involve extracting patches of the long hair algae. So we just finished doing a 15-gallon water change. We siphoned out probably 5 gallons of it to acclimate the fish, and the other 10 gallons we devoted to siphoning little clumps of algae out of the tank. It's been a little more than a half hour that we've been acclimating the fish. I'm in no big hurry, so I'm going to go ahead and just let them soak here or acclimate for a little bit longer. So it's now actually been a few hours that we've been acclimating those fish. I'm going to net them into the tank here in just a moment, but I thought I'd kind of talk about what's occurred in the tank since we've added all of those corals. One of which you might remember was a golden head sleeper goby or a sifter goby. He generates his food source by sifting gravel through his mouth, discharging it out the back of his gills. The reality is that in most cases there's not enough food in the sand for one of those to survive very long. And the other reality is that they usually do a pretty good job until they expire, and that job that they do involves sifting a whole lot of sand. In this case, we've actually he's stirred up quite a bit of sediment. Now that has its pluses and minuses. The plus side is that might actually end up being food for the corals and the anemones. Because in the ocean there's nobody out there with a turkey baster squeezing little frozen or defrosted foods into them. They survive by collecting detritus and debris and food sources that pass on by. Granted, there's a whole lot more plankton involved, but at the same time there's also debris involved. And in the case of the aquarium, all of this debris being suspended all the time, there's bacteria in the water, and the corals as well as the anemones all feed off this stuff. So there is an upside to that. The downside is there's a lot of sediment that settles on things, and it does not really cloud the view into the tank, but it lessens it a little bit. My thinking is that something to create additional water movement inside the tank would be appropriate at this point. And I know in the beginning of this series I talked about adding that sea swirl in there, and I kind of talked myself out of it because thinking the anemones like that position they're in where they're kind of underneath a laminar or a layer of water flow, and they can receive the food that floats off of there or falls off of there. And that if I created an oscillating current that they would maybe not feel as secure and then begin to get up and move around. Keep in mind, you don't really want an anemone moving around because invariably he'll sting everything that he comes along next to. In fact, I need to move a coral that I moved just a little bit earlier. I need to move him away from where the anemone could potentially sting him, and he's just now beginning to open back up, so I'd like to give him a fair chance. So my point is that I could kind of talk myself out of the oscillating or the back and forth sea swirl unit, which I already have here, and could easily incorporate it into the system. It does require a little bit of space above the top of the tank, but and I might even have to drill a hole in the tank to accommodate the discharge. The alternative would be some of those internal power heads, but we don't really have any of those to use at this time, so keeping within the realm of working with what we have, I probably won't go that direction for the moment.
the idea of the random or back and forth water flow is that debris doesn't get a chance to really settle down in any one particular spot. And so with the sifter goby out there sifting the sand, suspending all this debris up into the water column, now with that back and forth oscillation, it would help, again, keep that debris suspended and eventually out the internal overflow. Where I guess the only other place it could go would be settling down in the sump below, or possibly at some point becoming food source for the algae scrubber. Another avenue to consider. So anyhow, I've got these fish over here. These are cardinal fish. There's some pajama cardinals with a single Bangai cardinal in there. And then over here are some long spine cardinal fish, or the ones that have the blue hue to them. And then an opposing Bangai cardinal. So I think we're ready to net them up into the tank at this point. We'll go ahead and use our net and scoop these right out of the bucket.
In many situations, I would use my hand to gather the fish in the bucket and then lift them up and into the tank. These fish are much smaller and would stress out much more so with me chasing them around with my big hand. So I'll use a net to collect the fish this time. My hesitation with a net is some fish can become snagged in the net, and their rescue sometimes ends up being as traumatic, if not more, than being chased around with my big hand.
They've kind of scattered a little bit. There's 3 of them in the back corner there. And of course the chocolate tang is going to make them aware as to who the boss in the tank is. I thought I saw somebody come over here. So we expect them to scatter, and it'll take a little while before they get comfortable back in the tank. So let's go ahead and add the blue spine cardinals and the other Bangai.
If you're wondering why I selected cardinal fish, it's because not only do they school, but they have an interesting social behavior. Typically, cardinal fish are mouth brooders, which means the baby fish are held inside the mouth of the fish. And it's usually the male whose job it is to hold those fish in his mouth. There's also the uniqueness of the transfer of eggs from the female to the male. Additionally, there's a hierarchy within the group of fish. That hierarchy includes dominance not just between the male fish, but courtship of the female fish by other males.
So we'll go ahead and close the lid on the aquarium, let things settle down, and we'll see how the fish do. Hello, my name is Jim Stime. I'm with Midwater Systems, and I'm the developer of the Jellyquarium. The Jellyquarium is a tank designed specifically for the keeping of jellyfish. I offer 5 different sizes of tanks designed to be built into a wall or a freestanding cabinet. I also offer the inexpensive Mini Jellyquarium, which has its filter system built into its backside. Additionally, I offer tank-raised moon jellyfish, as well as a line of tanks designed for producing your own jellyfish. For more information on this fascinating world of keeping jellyfish, visit jellyquarium.com.
Did you see what happened at the recent Marine Aquarium Expo in Costa Mesa, California? YouTube's own Mr. Saltwater Tank and the LA Fishguy bumped into each other. Actually, Mark Callahan did an interview with Jim Stime. We had a good time dodging the attendees in the aisle, And just as we got started, a wave of interested hobbyists gazed in awe at the mini jelly aquarium display set up in the booth. It was great to meet Mark, and if you have not yet, make sure to check out Mr. Saltwater Tank on YouTube.
So here's what happens when I don't clean the screen on the algae scrubber frequently enough. It'll begin to overflow. I'm not sure where it's dripping out of, but that's water there on the floor. And then of course the water level is low inside the filter, and you can see that's just air bubbles that the pump is pumping, which is what's making that noise. You take the lid off. You can see here that it's full, and it's got so much algae growing in it that it can't, doesn't let the water exit out. So I'm going to have to unplug this, clean up the little drippage here a little bit. Good thing all this electrical is elevated. It's always a good thing to elevate electrical anyhow, such as power strips up on the back. And I'll need to clean the screen now.
And I say now, not only because it's just about midnight, but it'll only continue to overflow until I resolve the blockage. And that's exactly what it is. The algae is growing so quickly at this point within inside the scrubber that if not harvested at least twice a week, at this point in the resolution of the algae problem, it will create so much growth in the scrubber that it will block its exit and block the flow, returning back to the sump.
And you can see there's quite a bit of algae on there, but really the issue is what's inside the scrubber still. And you can see there's an abundance of algae still inside the unit that I need to clean out.
At this point in its consumption of nutrients from the aquarium water, we are producing a fast-growing, stringy Easter grass type of algae. Because it is flourishing, it's also consuming nutrients. That's good, but only if you're keeping up with the need to remove the algae growth. At this point, it's at least twice a week.
And you know, I did tell Brian, the fellow who makes these scrubbers, last time I saw him, I said, if your ears happen to be burning sometime, it's probably because I'm cussing at you as a result of my algae scrubber overflowing. But the truth is, this is not the fault of the algae scrubber. It's a fault of the algae guy who isn't cleaning the screen often enough. Now the reality is I'm down to about every 4 or 5 days. And it's also quite possible that maybe I'm not cleaning the screen enough and it grows back faster. So I really have only myself to blame for any spills that could be occurring. Okay, so we've cleaned off that screen. We're going to go ahead and put it back inside the scrubber.
It's been pointed out to me that if I used a better tool to scrape the screen cleaner, it would take a bit longer before the algae actually grew back.
And go ahead and plug it back in. And that gurgling noise is the drain out of the scrubber. Basically, I've got about the maximum amount of water going through this little spray bar and exiting out that drain that it can technically swallow. And it was that noise that I thought I heard earlier and felt I was okay, because again, that means it's a clean screen, water's flowing through there as fast as it can. But the noise that I was hearing was the water pump supplying the scrubber, sucking air down here, because there was no water or very little water exiting. So get a towel, I'll clean up that there. I don't think it ventured out onto the carpet. There is a little bit back there, but I guess that'll also require me or precipitate me to take the aquarium cleaning magnets and maybe clean the face of the aquarium. And of course, at the same time, I need to add some water back to the system.
So as we add back some salt water to our aquarium, plan on coming back for part 6 as we get out the nitrate and phosphate test kits and see if the algae scrubber really has done anything.